I started from nothing and established his empire, yet hair moved my name from all of the stories. For 20 years, I said nothing as he took acknowledgement for my efforts. Next came the day I finally spoke out was my wedding day. Everyone was. Surprised by what transpired next. Includes me. If you've ever experienced it, disregarded, or had someone, this story is going to blow your mind. You in the heart. Verify that you're a press that notice and subscribed. Ring because tales such as this must be heard. Let's get started. My name is Jasmine Parker, and I would like to share with you regarding the day I made the decision to cease becoming unseen. But in order to comprehend that day, I must return you to the place where it all began. Started Detroit, 2003. I was 32 years old. Elderly, a Harvard MBA graduate, and a single mother, and a desire that seemed unattainable. You see, I came up with this algorithm that might forecast market patterns using frightening precision. I had been occupied with it. For many years, remaining up late following my daughter ran to bed. Figures on my outdated laptop till my eyes ached. However, in Silicon Valley, no one was interested in listening to a black woman. From Detroit. One door after the other banged. Close. Meeting after meeting concluded with courteous grins and hollow assurances. Next, I get to know David Sterling. David was unique among the other IT guys I came across. He was in dire need of something. His startup was bleeding. Cash. Investors were abandoning him. Also, he was about 3 months away from losing everything. As I entered in his little Palo Alto office, he refused to regard me as an outsider. He gave me the impression that I may be his deliverance. I displayed to him an algorithm. I described how it could transform predictive analytics, how it may salvage his business and change a whole sector. David's eyes glowed. Similar to Christmas morning. He recognized what I was providing him right away. Not only a lifeline but a spacecraft. To stars. This is amazing, he remarked. Reclining in his seat. This may alter everything. We exchanged handshakes that day. A straightforward handshake with no writing down. Just two people. No solicitor syndicals negotiating on the basis of trust. I would aid him by giving him my algorithm, put that into practice, and we would construct something wonderful in tandem. He pledged acknowledgement, collaboration, and a portion of what success might ensue. It trusted him. The initial months were enchanting. My algorithm performed even better. More than I had anticipated. The business moved from failed to flourishing nearly immediately. Investors were waiting in queue, and clients were hurling cash at the IT industry, and US was talking about David's groundbreaking fresh method for predictive analytics. However, an odd thing began to occur. In the beginning, David would present as one of his co-founders, his talented companion. However, slowly and quietly, my title began to move. I was made the leader of data, followed by the senior consultant, then only a team member. When reporters requested interviews, David would take them by themselves. When customers wished to meet the brilliant person who created the David, would schedule alone using an algorithm. Gatherings. You are too precious to be wasted. He would tell me it was time for publicity. Permit me to manage the circus of the media, while you concentration the technical tasks. It sounded sensible. It seemed sensible. Following nonetheless, I never felt at ease with attention. Nevertheless, I felt more content in the background, ensuring that everything functioned effortlessly, while David assumed the part of CEO's charisma. However, gradually, uneasiness developed into something more. A growing awareness that I was being removed from my own narrative. The initial in 2004, a patent application was submitted. It simply had David's name on it. Name. I questioned him about it, and he appeared very perplexed. You, Jasmine, you understand how these things operate? As the CEO, the proprietor of the business, the patents must be submitted in the name of the business, and that's my name. However, as you are aware, without you I couldn't have completed this. I wished to accept his credibility. I had to have faith in him, so I did. Years went by. The business expanded from a startup to an important contributor to a tech behemoth. David Sterling became well known, highlighted in magazine covers, asymptotic in international conferences. He was the genius, the visionary, the individual who had transformed predictive analysis. I was still there, continuing to work and continue to enhance the algorithm upon which his empire has been founded. However, in my own narrative, I was turning into a ghost. The business would hire new staff members and never even be aware that I had contributed to developing the technology that enabled the occupations that are feasible. Board meetings evolved into workouts while seeing David give my concepts as his own revelations. I would sit there quiet as he described ideas I'd created with the language I had taught him. The stealing wasn't the worst aspect off credit. The gaslighting was the cause. David had the ability to cause me to doubt my own recollections, my personal input. When I would nod if you brought up the early days, sympathetically, and utter phrases like as of sure, you were really beneficial in carrying out the plan. When I'd cite certain inventions I've produced, he would answer with a smile, yes, you've always been excellent in putting the ideas we discussed. Carrying out, putting into practice, assisting, never producing, and never I began, but never took the lead, maintaining thorough records on everything, notes from meetings, emails, and development logs. I recorded every discussion, every choice, each innovation. A piece of me was aware that I was constructing a case, but I was unsure of the type of case or when I may require it. The tipping moment arrived. David was interviewed in 2008 for a prominent business publication. Among them cover articles on inspirational figures. Scene from my workspace as Thea photographer was put up in the meeting room, while David had the honors impotence with just his name on them. The interviewer inquired about his inspiration. Regarding the instant he realized he had a groundbreaking idea, David explained the narrative of his late night working on algorithms in the garage. Possessing a discovery at 3 a.m, explained the thrill of realization, the thrill of knowing that he will crack the code. He had produced something that may alter word for word. It was my narrative. Phrase, nearly. The late evenings, the breakthrough, the thrill, everything, man. However, in his narrative, I didn't exist. I had been wiped out entirely from beginning of my own invention, returned home that evening and sobbed for the first time in years. Not simply tears of sadness, but irate and irritated ones. Type of tears that result from understanding you have participated in your own rubber. I thought about thought about filing a lawsuit. I thought of disclosing things, but I also took into account my daughter who was beginning high school and having college aspirations. I thought stability my employment gave me financially, the stability and health insurance, taken into account that David Sterling had legal hoards and I had a few stored emails. So I decided to stay. I remained and observed as my algorithm David Sterling became one of the wealthiest. I stayed and observed American males. When he received an invitation to the White House, he presented theses after being highlighted in films about technology invention. I remained and developed into a very excellent at remaining undetectable. However, the cost of invisibility is that it erodes piece by piece at your soul. Each day he entered the office, I experienced some more ethereal. Each gathering where my name was not mentioned when my ideas were addressed, connected, I felt somewhat more like I was fading. The years were hazy. David's business went public together. He purchased a Malibu house, Apen House, a private jet in New York. Dated philanthropists and movie stars. Time magazine ranked him one of the most powerful individuals. Throughout it all, I stayed out of the spotlight. Unseen mastermind behind his highly prominent achievement. In 2023, however, something unexpectedly, David Sterling made the decision to marry. Her name was Catherine, who was beautiful. Environmental attorney with a sincere grin and a strong commitment to social justice. They had spent 2 years together. And to be honest, she seemed to bring him joy. In a manner that I had never seen him do before. Declared their engagement, I experienced odd mixture of feelings. I'm glad for him indeed, but in addition to that, a feeling of a conclusion in sight. The wedding was intended for the Vineyard of Martha's fantastic event. Attended by 300 people, the guest list was a veritable who's who of politics Entertainment and technology? Surprisingly, I got invited somehow. David responded, I want you there. Jasmine, when he gave the invitation to Nefer me. You've been such an insignificant portion of our trip. It wouldn't be appropriate to celebrate without you. I nearly skipped it. What was step point? I had been observing David for 20 years, commemorate accomplishments that should have been ours, acknowledgement that ought to have been distributed. Why would he get married? Anything different? However, something forced me could have changed my viewpoint out of curiosity. Perhaps it was a feeling of completion. Perhaps I knew in my heart that this would be my moment. It was a lovely wedding, the type of beauty that online-bounded funds can purchase: white tents on well-kept lawns, flowers brought in from worldwide, a quartet of strings as the sun sank over the ocean. I was playing sat in the rear and observed David and Catherine made vows with him as they agreed to be truthful with one another, to encourage one another to exchange their lives entirely. Next came the speeches, reception, and David's finest man-related tales concerning their college days. Catherine's sister spoke, he discovering genuine love, followed by David. He got up, holding a glass of champagne hand, prepared to speak to his visitors. 20 he started years ago, and I was a failure business owner with a failing enterprise and a seemingly unattainable dream. But I had something lacking in the majority of people. An idea of how technology may alter the world. I experienced nausea. Drop. Let's go. I had the same thinking. Tail, the identical rubber. I spent several evenings in my garage working on algorithms in an attempt to decipher the code of forecasting analytics. Then, one evening I woke up about 3 in the morning and had a breakthrough. I became aware that I had produced anything that may completely change the way we comprehend data and how we forecast patterns. Our decision-making process. The word struck me like jabs. My garage, my invention, my breakthrough at 3 in the morning, however, even after all these years mine, but presented as his. That innovation rested in all you see now. Business, the achievement and the capacity to change the world. It's all about began with the one instance of motivation. The evening when I steadfastly pursued my dream, as the visitors cheered, David grinned and took in the esteem, love, and adoration of all the individuals under that tent. And something I simply shattered within, and I got up. IDN single quotes the intend. Teal. I didn't consider it. I recently found myself standing in their ear of the tent. Trembling hands, Booty said in a firm voice, Pardon me. The tent became silent. David raised his head, surprised and even irritated by Thea. Apologize for disturbing you, but it went on, my voice echoing over the quiet audience. Although I must say something made David's face go white. Understood. At that very instant, he realized what was anticipated. On Jasmine, I murmured, Parker, as I approached cautiously, the tent's front. I also have to be really honest with you about it. David just described a breakthrough. The quiet was overwhelming. 300 of the greatest influential individuals worldwide. And you, David, that garage sounds like a pin dropping. Said that 3. M was my breakthrough my decision to stay up for beyond my daughter's bedtime, developing an algorithm that might make everything different. That idea, that dream, the inspiration moment was mine, and I arrived at the head of Thetan and looked out into the throng, looked back at me, some in astonishment, some perplexed, while some are starting to grasp. I have seen David give stories for 20 years, wonderful tale. I've listened to it for 20 years. To him explain my efforts, my creativity. He claimed my invention as his own, and I stayed quiet as I believed that to be the cost of security, of retaining my employment, of safeguarding the future of my daughter, examined. David, who had a mask of anger and terror, yet I can't keep quiet no more, not while I'm observing him, pledged to be truthful with his new bride and transparency while positioned on Abyssus, based on falsehoods. Catherine turned to face the bride and said, Your spouse didn't develop the device that produced I made him wealthy. But your spouse didn't. I did have that breakthrough moment. Your empire wasn't built by your husband. He constructed it solely, using my ideas, efforts, and the restless nights and my never-ending computations. The tent burst, screams. The sound of 300 people murmuring gunspically, rather intrigued by their glasses of champagne. David stepped ahead, his cheeks flushed with shame and rage. "You're acting like absurd. You're experiencing some sort of security collapse. I have paperwork," I said, my voice trailing off via his demonstrations. 20 years of mails, development logs, docs, meeting minutes. I have documentation of each dialogue, each choice, and each linear of code. I have people who can recall anyone recall the early days when Yao declared me to be one of your co-founders. Before you determined that I was worth more and discernible. I faced the audience once more, my voice more confident and powerful now. Don't say this to spoil anyone's wedding. The reason I mention this is I'm sick and weary of being invisible, of witnessing others receive praise for me job. I'm fed up with living in shadows cast by my own accomplishments. Scanning the faces in the tent, it appeared to notice me for the first time. David was created by my algorithm. My efforts turned Sterling's enterprise into a multimillionaire. My inventions transformed the IT sector. And for 2 decades I allowed he removed me from that narrative, but no longer. I moved in the direction of the exit. My heart is racing, but I'm walking steadily, I remarked, Catherine, pausing at Deborah's table. You appear to be a beautiful individual. You should choose someone who will be truthful with you. Ask him about the early days of patents. I exited the room to ask him about Jasmine Parker, tent, and made my way to my vehicle. My hands-eye struggled with the keys, trembling. I could hear the mayhem behind me, exploding. Confused voices rising, Andrej, the scraping sound of chairs as people rose. And there was a general mutter of Athrong that had just seen something remarkable. I drove quietly home, my head spinning. I'd succeeded. After being invisible for years, I had finally spoken out and spoken the truth, and I was unaware of what would occur. Next. Everything that followed was crucial. The tale went viral on social media. In a matter of hours. Someone had captured my phone conversation, and by morning it received millions of views, and reporters were phoning in order to schedule interviews. Other tech employees were coming out with their personal accounts of experiencing their contributions that have been stolen or removed. Jasmine Parker's #, waste trending globally. David attempted to manage the story and the hiring crisis managing companies and making announcements about irate ex-workers and unfounded charges. However, it had already come too late. Spoken language spreads like wildfire. In a week, significant news investigative reports were being published by articles discussing the erasing culture in Silicon Valley. Hearings before Congress were made public. The Securities and the Exchange Commission initiated an examination to determine whether David's business has misrepresented where it came from. To investors. Next came the lawsuits. Dozens of them, not just mine. Other developers, more artists, and other unseen participants who had been removed from their own accounts. The court battles were costly and time-consuming, yet he wasn't battling by myself this time. David Sterling's enterprise ultimately failed to just fall apart. It fell apart. Analysis showed a trend of stolen concepts, deleted entries, and extensive and systemic prejudice more than simply my case. The business lost worth billions. Important contracts were canceled. David was compelled to resign as CEO. The settlement was reached $2.3 billion years later. Additional funds more than I ever could have imagined, yet the triumph was not in the money. My name appeared on patents where it was appropriate. My tale was told truthfully. Not being able to visit her mother as inconspicuous, but as the pioneer I'd constantly been. I made advantage of the settlement to launch my own business, concentrating on establishing chances for innovators who are underrepresented, created a foundation that offers legal assistance for those battling to return the favor for their labor. I am currently sharing my story at conferences. Urging people to speak up before the age of 20. After several years, David Sterling submitted a last year's bankruptcy. He's currently facing criminal accusations of tax evasion and fraud avoidance. His union with Katharina lasted precisely 6 months following feuding, saying she couldn't rely on someone who has based his whole existence on falsehoods. I don't enjoy his decline, I don't. However, I do talk a contentment with the reality fate eventually surfaced. My tale is being accurately informed at last that my growing up, the girl observed her mother stand up for what was right, even if it meant needed. 20 years to summon the bravery. The tale of Jasmine serves as a reminder that the truth always manages to come to light. Please share this story if it touched you with a recipient who should hear it. Click the like button if you think everyone merits recognition for their efforts, and subscribe to hear more about those who didn't remain mute. What would ya have performed in Jasmine's place? Allow me talk no in the comments section below. Occasionally, the strongest action you can do is just don't remain invisible any longer. Justice might take 20 years at times, but speaking your truth is something you can do at any time.